Alright, welcome back to a more advanced topic, I say. Team building, especially for PvP. So, I often see people in the Discord asking, what is a good PvP defense? How do I build good PvP teams? And I want to briefly go over this topic and explain the thought process behind building good PvP teams. I can't give you the best team because there is no best team. It is really dependent on the current state of the PvP meta. It also differs between the different PvP groups because they have different charts available and so on. For example, I'm in PvP group 15 and the green colored frontline was really overpowered for a very long time because we didn't had access to Red Nyang because she was too old for PvP group 15, and other red battle characters which came out later, like the Kuruko as buffer or the OP Dragon Toma. Those came way later. So until they came around, if you had green frontline with near Misaka, it was a really solid must-have frontline in this PvP group. Which didn't work in other groups because they had the Red Young available at this time. Just as an example why it matters to pay attention to your meta in the group. So, generally speaking, there is the idea for offensive teams that you have first slot buffer and the second and third slot are mainly damage dealer. And this the reason for this is the thing you can see right here with the bars. It's the same for offense and defense. If you start in your first turn, the first character uses a skill. And in the next turn, the second slot uses the skill. And in the third turn, the third character uses the skill. For backline it doesn't matter. For the backline, the character uses the skill as soon as the backline character comes into play. This is a skill order which is also important, and this is the reason why you normally play buffer and offense. This is not offense, it's defense. In offense you play a buffer in first slot, and the second and third slot are usually characters with two directions in a V shape, like left right, or three directional characters. So the reason for this is your characters, you will form a line. They will take the second, third and fourth slot on the battlefield, and then your buffer buffs two of them, and your attack characters attack the middle character on the defense twice. That's why usually you should put either a heavy damage card, but with the current power creep I think the damage card isn't worth it anymore, at least not to this extent. Usually you can expect in the defense that the second character just dies. And you can build around it if you use a defensive assist which triggers on death, or you use someone who triggers at the start of your turn, so it does at least something before the character in the slot dies. For my strategy, I try to keep the third slot alive. That's why I use damage card on first and second slot and put guard on the third slot, in order to have a good chance of a comeback. Also, the fourth slot is really important because the fourth slot is usually a slot where the tempo comes back into your favor. So my defenses work the best in my group if I put a really strong offensive character on the fourth slot. And right now this is the overpowered Toma. Before it was another character, I think it was 5.1, because she has a strong skill, also left right arrows, and I placed her with the index, the doctor index. That's like the general idea about the defense. I use the Kanzaki for stalling, and the 5th or 6th slot is your general ultimate. There's also a guide made by Ikchan and Mystique about the defense, and there are like a general approach, which is a bit different than my approach. As I said, it depends on how your group works. So in their group, at least when they created this guide, I will show it briefly in the video. They recommend a first slot taunt, second slot is like a flex spot because it's dice, and the third one is your DPS / your comeback unit. And in their case, they have the Staller in fourth, so that means they would use a taunt or a dispel, somewhat like I have, but they would use a nuker or another character with strong fighting capabilities like Blue Aqua and Green Gunha Fest are usually strong fighters for the other backline slot which isn't Idle OT. Usually the Idle OT is there because she has an area of effect. She ultimate hits everyone and ignores like guard and stuff, so it's really important to have a really good area of effect ultimate which penetrates like everything. So that's the general idea for the defense team. There is the guide is linked in the Discord, which is posted in the description below, so check it out if you want to see the guide more in detail from Ikchan and Mystique. And also there are some example teams they posted. Keep in mind, like at least in my case, the meta shifted away from damage cut and more towards guard, but now it's kind of hybrid, so it changes regularly. And for the offensive team, as I already mentioned, you have different kinds of options. Usually you want to target an enemy team where you think, yeah, it's pretty easy, I can beat it. Don't worry about the power level. If this team looks weak like this one, the Green Misaka backline is a really bad character for PvP. The only somewhat difficult char could be the 4th slot Toma, but I think the frontline is weak, so I can do it. And based on their 6 battle characters, you have to build an offense. So this one is kinda cheese and only works in my group, so don't pay a lot of attention to this one. This was an old school mental team which kinda has the plan I have. So the index right here is the buffer. She places in between those two on the 3rd slot on the battlefield, and she skills also left triggers and also the Shari triggers and buffs everyone. So my both main damage are pretty strong, and if the enemy doesn't has any guard, they will just wreck them. There's also the index I mentioned earlier. She gives guard whenever they kill an enemy, so my frontline lives for another turn at least. Then I have a Staller on the 4th slot. She's just there to eat enemy attacks, and also I gave her a mental buffer, so she buffs my other metal characters. And the Kakine is only there for yellow penetration bonus, yellow resistant down bonus, so my Idle OT nukes a bit harder. There's also a physical equivalent. I think it's somewhat here, but it's like kind of a mixed team. I went for a yellow backline to have a better combination for all the auras, and I used the front line right here. Kanzaki buffed this Kuroko, and she got penetration from the Uiharu, and then she could at least kill 2 people. But I would only use this one against blue enemy front lines. So for this specifically, I would maybe use this one because the Misaka would kill their 2 yellow front lines, and my 5.1 would kill the Dress Sucker, so their front line would already be dead in the first turn. So you should think about how can you counter their chars normally. And yeah, I will use this one because it's a universal overpowered combination in my group. It's a double dispel. It works because it dispels this OP Toma dispels and kills like almost all front lines, and those few which survive will get dispelled again when they try to counter buff, and then the enemy has nothing left really to do any damage, and then Kazaki comes out and just tanks the rest. So the remaining characters can clear the battlefield. So that's the general idea about how I build PvP teams. There's also an offensive part of the guide from Ixchan and Mystic, which is also in the Discord channel I mentioned earlier. And they use for attack first slot buffer and taunt, and second slot is debuffer or DPS, and third is always DPS. And as I mentioned earlier, he also recommend using the either V-shape arrows or the 3-directional arrows. And yeah, as I mentioned, link is below, check it out. You see I won. It's always recommended to check out the replay. Replay analysis is really important, especially if you want to figure out why you lose a fight, and you then see, hey, they are having a really good combination with certain characters and damage cuts, so you should be thinking about the solution. How do you counter damage cuts? Is a dispel important? Maybe play a bit slower and use more buffs. There are different ways to counter defense. If you're seeking specific help, you should ask in the Discord. As you can see, double dispel, enemy has nothing left, and now he gets the beating. Only last orders left, and I already won with all the characters left. Again, buffing from Kuroko, it should be enough, but not enough. No, it's enough. So it went even better as planned. Yeah, that's like the general ideas how to approach PvP team building. If you build your offensive or defensive teams, keep the decks in mind, because when your ultimate bar is ready for one character to use the ultimate, it will choose one of the highest total decks. Meaning, if you have a really fast character, like the Ojira Toma is pretty fast, and the Idol Oti is pretty slow, she only has 2.4 K decks. Comparison, Red Toma has 3.3. So you should always make sure that the combination of battle and assist character you want to use the SP has the highest total amount of decks. So those two together have 4.7 thousand, which should be more than Kanzaki and Doleros. Nice. It also should be more than Toma and the Dragon Iris, which is not true, I think. But in my case, it isn't that bad, because Toma's SP is also really strong. But it would be a thing which I might have to change for the defense to work better. Alright. It's a bit different for 3v3, because in 3v3 you can play a bit with the hidden team. You have, in a higher ranking, starting at 500 I think, the one team is hidden. And then you can play around and hide your weak teams or your strong teams, maybe if you want to surprise the opponent, and do some cheesy combinations. Like I saw one who used the first slot as red. I thought, hey, maybe it's doing a red defense. I put a blue team, but all other characters were green. So I fell into his trap and lost the battle. Which is something you can keep in mind. But for, like, let's say, most players, you just build 3 PvP teams. Maybe think of a good mix, how the auras work together and buff themselves. That's why I'm doing like a green-red hybrid right here and a blue Kuroko to counter a bit of blue front lines, which worked somewhat decently, I think. Like this was my way back, my earlier defense, where I mentioned earlier that the second slot dies, so I put Uiharu here, Kakine is only for the aura there, and Lome is the substitute for Aqua, which I didn't have at this time. Alright, that's all I have to say for PvP teams for now. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.